Hey, what is up, mortals? It is, here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 3 season 3 of What If Izuku Had a Villain Quirk. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying, sit back and relax, you're in for a treat. So, we begin. Izuku cursed the seemingly endless bad luck that seemed to constantly hover over his class. They were face to face with more villains and Pixie Bob was already injured by them. He snapped his head around, looking around for Kota, the small child being in extreme danger in an environment like this. But thoughts were cut off as the reptilian villain came forward, beginning a monologue about how they were the Vanguard Action Squad of the League of Villains. The scarfed villain introduced himself as Spinner, one of the newer criminals inspired by Stain's twisted ideals. Tiger stepped forward, anger radiating off of him as he shifted into a battle stance. Mandalay urged the students to head back to camp, placing Ida in charge of getting them there. Izuku directly disobeyed the order and called out to the telepathic hero that he knew where her cousin's son was, and pointed it subtly out so she could send a psychic message. The message arrived there, but the child was already in an encounter with a villain, a familiar one to him, the very murderer of his parents, Goto Imasuji Aka Muscular. The psychotic man raised a hand to crush him when a hissing sound caught their ears and a green and red gas filled the air as Kodo was tackled away. The black-haired tyke questioned why Midoriya was here, internally grateful he had saved him. A quick analysis flashed through the teen's mind. The villain clearly knew who he was and possibly what his quirk was, which would make him difficult to beat. However, as he turned to see the crying boy, his will steeled itself. He bit his lip as he felt the ruined parts of Mei's mask shift. He drew close to the scared child behind him. Kodo, listen to me, the viridian-eyed adolescent whispered softly. Just out of man's earshot, the masks I usually carry with me were broken when we landed. I'm going to use my quirk, and whatever you do, don't breathe it in. A shaky nod was the response Izuku received, being enough for him as he stood up to face the hulking felon before him. The villain began taunting the hero in training, letting his enhancement quirk recede. You're different than those other kids, aren't you? Shigaraki was watching you at the sports festival. He saw how merciless you can be with your quirk. Some of the color in the student's face drained. I was told that we couldn't bang you or that Katsuki kid up as much as the other little heroes, but that won't stop me from seeing your blood. The man lunged forward, letting his quirk buff up one of his arms. It was rather foolhardy since the League had probably warned them of his quirk. He launched him and Kota back with a quick plume of gas before aiming his arms at the murderer. A sea of opaque, fear toxin shot out from his arms, the pressure affecting the flight path of his foe and sending him to the edge of the overhang. An insane laugh was all he heard as a fist slammed him against the cliff face. Mocking words continued to spill from the villain's mouth, both worrying and angering the protege of Midnight. A blast that potent should have neutralized the meathead criminal. Another punch was wound back, ready to hit him, and the teenager gritted his teeth, yelling out in rage as he unleashed another wave of his toxin. He was batted away again, the man stepping through it, confusion on his face for a moment before he shook it off. He began to mentally torture the injured young man, a voice calling him from behind. Kota had snapped out of his shock and began yelling questions at the gigantic male, whether he had hurt and tormented his parents the same way. The psychopathic criminal dismissed the question, stating the only reason they had died in the first place was that they got in the way. Their deaths were just the result of the participants of the fight doing their best. He turned around and got another faceful of gas, slamming the source into the mountain again. A weak voice emanated from the dent in the mountainside. The bloodied male stepped out. I won't let you hurt him, you sick bastard. A laugh came from the villain as he prepared to kill the child of two of his previous victims. He took a single step before blinking for a second, rubbing his eyes. Fear began to fill them as he yelled out no, over and over again. He began wildly swinging around in the empty night air. Midoriya leapt through the air and bathed Muscular in even more of the hallucinogen. The yelling began to evolve into screams as the sheer amount of toxin he had inhaled began to register in his large bodily system. The man was attacking wildly, stumbling off the cliff and continuing to attack on landing. Damn it, took long enough. I really wish that my quirk didn't act like actual toxins sometimes. The teen winced as he held his stomach, feeling his ribs possibly broken, bruised at least, and was in immense pain. Grab on Kota, we need to get out of here, now. The child nodded and hopped onto the hero in training's back, the teen taking off into the forest, gliding along the tree line with a judicious use of his quirk. For a while, the hissing of the gas was all that was heard. Why did you do that? The tyke spoke softly. You could have been killed, just like. I did it because that's my duty. Kota, a small smile was revealed for a second as Izuku turned to look at his passenger for a brief moment. Heroes help people, no matter what it costs. Your parents never meant to leave you all alone. They just wanted to make the world a safer place for you. The night was silent again, before the orphan son of the water hose heroes began to sob once more, clinging tighter to his savior. The jungle-haired male wished he could comfort the younger one better, but he had his focus set of the blue flames in the distance. Kota, your quirk. Can you use it for me? He felt a shift from the kid on his back. Those flames in the distance. We need to put them out. My friends could be trapped by them and you may be the only one who can help them. Can you do it? He heard a soft, but affirmative, sound from his passenger. He smiled softly as he continued the path towards the fire. When the pain in his abdomen spiked, he grunted as he had to come in for an early landing, just beyond the halfway point to the blaze. Damn it, I can't steer us straight with this pain constantly flaring up. I can barely keep myself from blacking out. He shifted his grip on the child on his back and ran through the forest. We'll have to go on foot. Keep your out for any trouble, all right. The two kept silent, the sound of their footfalls being the only audible thing around them. They heard the sound of another person approaching as they turned to see the one a homeroom teacher there. The student called out to the pro, extremely glad to see him. He pleaded with the pro to take care of Coda being stopped by him for a second so he could talk to Mandalay. The only reason he had asked the boy to do the earlier task was because he needed him to be safe, the best place for that being with his classmate. Knowing he wouldn't be able to talk him out, Eraserhead simply passed on a message for his fellow pro and squeezed a promise from the problematic boy that he'd remain safe. It was several minutes before the teen arrived at the clearing where he had left the wild pussycats. As he arrived, he saw a gigantic blade coming down at Mandalay and let loose a pressurized blast, knocking the sword and its owner astray. Mandalay, I found Koda's, he's okay. Izuku breathed heavily and painfully as he met the relieved eyes of the woman. Aizawa wanted you to pass a message to Class 1 and B. He has given us all permission to engage in fights against the villains. The two villains recognized the injured adolescent immediately as one of the people they were set to capture. I also need one more message sent. Viridian eyes met with Magni and Spinners, seeing the recognition in them. They're not just here to attack. They're on a mission and searching for Kachin. And me. Mandalay's eyes widened as she asked who Kachin was, hoping to find out who else was being targeted, only to see the boy launch into the air with his hallucinogen. The distracted felons were struck down by the opponents they seemed to have forgotten. The telepathic pussycat sent out another telepathic message, alerting the entire camp of the danger the two were in, asking them to stay safe. Midoriya landed roughly from his sudden flight, taking off in a sprint. As he continued on his path, he heard the distinctive sound of a gunshot, drawing his attention momentarily. He heard even more echoing out, the sound eventually stopping. The jungle-haired boy could only hope that that meant the students had beaten whoever held the weapon. He was suddenly stopped by a monstrous noise and a figure snatching him up. He cried out in pain and heard an apology from Shaoji, the figure that had grabbed him. He questioned the injury the multi-limbed male had sustained, receiving news that a villain had attacked him, one that Bakugo and Todoroki were likely facing. Izuku was ready to go help them, when he was warned by Mizo that if they wanted to proceed, they'd have to face down Dark Shadow. He realized what he meant and paled as the distorted roar and shadowy figure came into view. He had his fellow student explain the events so he could get an idea on how Tokoyami's quirk managed to grow into the thing before them. He received information about the weakness of the shadowy beast and began to plan, wondering how they could get it to a light source as swiftly as possible. He had Shaoji dodge the attacks of the beast before they went towards the place they had last seen the villain. He saw blades of ice sticking out of the trees. He continued running with the masked teen. The arms he made to distribute sound without getting them hit worked well, leading Dark Shadow while keeping them mostly safe. The duo called out for a light from either one of their classmates. However, their request was halted for a second as Fumigage's quirk turned on the criminal who was attacking them, putting him out of commission. At the moment he finished, they both bathed the dark being in light, allowing the bird-faced boy control again. Midoriya gave a grim smile at him, offering a hand to help him up. Okay, I don't know if any of you heard, but these villains after me and Kachin, Katsuki blinked, going into a light daze. I have an idea what they want too. Shigaraki mentioned me being a villain yet when he left me alone at the mall. It is highly likely that we are set up on some sort of capture list as possible recruitments for the League. The implications made the situation much more grim as Katsuki began to yell about never being a shitty criminal. He was mostly ignored as they all planned a route that would keep the two targets safe while getting them back to camp as soon as possible. They stayed in formation, eventually coming across Asui and Uraraka, the latter seemingly having some of her blood drained before the girl who did the deed ran off into the woods. They explained that they were trying to keep Bakugo and himself safe, the two being right next to each other to keep an eye on the other. They had all turned when a hand was pressed against the neck of the protege of Midnight, the blonde next to him, instantly noticing the presence of the villain. An explosive attack was issued from him, but it was too late. A second hand grabbed the blonde and in a flash, both became marbles. The masked man grabbed them and hopped up into a tree as the remaining students snapped around. Shado's eyes blazed in hidden anger at the fact his classmates were so easily kidnapped. He let loose a wave of ice to try and trap the criminal, only to see him flying through the air, contacting his fellow villains that they had captured their quarry and to meet up at a rendezvous. The student chased after him, desperate to try and get to them in time. The son of Endeavor forced his anger aside, thinking what his friend would plan if he were here. An insane idea flashed across his mind, and he had Tsuyu wrap her tongue around him, Ochako and Xiaoji, flinging them high into the sky, right in Mr. Compress, and slamming him down to the earth. The villains instantly went on the attack, trying to free their ally. Ochako dodged a tongue of blue flames that was aimed at them, flipping backwards. Their heterochromatic classmate stopped an aerial assault from another villain as Mizo dodged a needle from the blonde girl they saw earlier. He grasped a plastic tube, pulled it tight, and swung the girl directly into a tree. While they were distracted, the man they slammed into the ground popped up from a marble he had left, annoyed at his performance being ruined. The scarred villain next to him questioned if he really had the students. He checked his pockets, shocked to find them empty. Mizo revealed they had taken their classmates back and fled, seeking shelter in the forest. However, luck was not on their side as the misty figure of the Warp Gate villain appeared in front of them. The figure appeared by his allies, allowing those there to escape. The source of the blue flames was prepared to go after them to retrieve the students they were after, only to be stopped by the magician. He revealed that he performed a bout of prestidigitation on the student who had routed around in his pockets. He removed his masks, revealing the real marbles were concealed in his mouth. He donned it once more as he began to sink into the rift. The trio sprinted towards him, desperate to get back their classmates. Only the masked face was left sticking out, just as a laser, Aoyama's to be precise, caught his face, knocking their compressed friends out of his mouth. They all reached out for them, one being caught by a hero in training, the other by a villain. Dabai let Shoto skid to a halt as he had his accomplice release their captives to check who they managed to keep. The form of Bakugo appeared next to the heroes, and Izuku was held by his throat, in shock as he was dragged through the portal. Todoroki ran and thrusted his hand out, trying to save one of his only friends. He missed. The portal closed and whisked the jungle-haired teen to somewhere else. Shock and anger registered on all their faces. The son of Endeavor screamed as a mountain of ice shot from his hands into the forest in front of him. He panted as he cursed himself for not reaching far enough, not getting there fast enough. Xiaoji and Ochako went to comfort him, blaming themselves as well. Despair was palpable around them as they returned to the camp, prepared to disclose the news to Eraserhead. Midoriya blinked as his eyes adjusted to the lighting of what appeared to be a bar. He heard a voice call him from behind, turning to see familiar red eyes. "I told you that you'd be a villain," yet the grin across Tamura's face chilled the teenager's spine. He felt a small flash of pain across the back of his head before the world went black. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video, so goodbye and have a divine day.